uh, Netaji was building an army and actually had stepped into Indian territory. So there was no political issue, no movement, no organization. The organization was broken completely. There was nothing. But its approach to the whole Azadi movement was duplicitous. It was hypocritical. That praise the INA activities, the soldiers, their patriotism, but don't praise Subhas Bose. But when his speech was broadcast by the All India Radio, this part was chopped out. So this was edited. He was alive and he returned to India. That was one of the big factors. If non-violence is responsible for anything, Satyagraha is responsible for anything, it is a partition of India.
Welcome to News Asia. Today we have with us Mr. Chandrachur Ghose. He is an author, columnist and a public speaker on history, politics, economics and environment. He graduated from Vishwabharati Shantiniketan and the University of Sussex. He is a fellow at the Foundation for Historical and Cultural Research. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for giving us time. Sir, as we all know, on 23rd January we will be celebrating Netaji's birthday.
Right.
Sir, our questions is around the theme of Netaji only, but there are certain questions which we will go ahead and we'll also talk about history and several other parts.
Sure, no problem.
Sir, the first question is, how were the INA soldiers treated in independent India and what led the likes of Habibur Rahman and Muhammad Zaman Kiani to join Pakistan and fight against India in the first Indo-Pak War?
Well, to state it very briefly, the INA soldiers were betrayed by the government of India. Because once the people of India got to know about the Indian National Army, they did not know about it. Because every news about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army and the Azadin government, of course, all his activities in Southeast Asia were suppressed by the British government. So there was absolutely no news in India. No, nothing was published. Only whatever Netaji used to broadcast, some of the speeches were heard secretly by his admirers, by the revolutionaries, and some politicians. Only those were the sources by which people could get to know something. But very few people actually heard those broadcasts. Not many people had radio at that time. So there was absolutely no knowledge among the common people. But after the World War ended, and when the soldiers of the INA were being brought back from Southeast Asia to India towards the end of 1945 for trial, they were being tried. So that's when the people of India rose up in rebellion throughout the country, and right from Northwest Frontier Province to Bengal to South Asia, South India, everywhere people rose in rebellion in support of the INA, because this was something unheard of. Nobody could imagine that Indian soldiers could get or could build an army. Somebody, a leader like Netaji, was building an army and actually had stepped into Indian territory. This was unthinkable at that time. So it inspired people to that extent that they rose up in revolution. Now, what happened is, at that time, after the World War ended, the Congress leaders were all in jail and they were released in May, June, around that time. They were released in 1945. And when they were released, they had no issue because they had been in prison from 1942. So there was no political issue, no movement, no organization. The organization was broken completely. There was nothing. So Gandhiji told them that go back to your constituencies, go back to your areas and do constructive work, because right now there is no agenda. And when the Congress met, the All India Congress Committee met, and they tried to create an action plan and everything. They found that although the Labour government under Clement Attlee had come to power, and before coming to power, they had promised that once they came to power, they will transfer power to Indians.
Yeah, that was in the manifesto.
That was the election manifesto. But in reality, that was not happening. So when the AICC met in probably September in Bombay, September 1945, Sardar Patel passed a resolution. He complained that although the British government had promised, they are not doing anything. So there is nothing in view. In the horizon, there is nothing. So what is going on? But there was nothing the Congress could do at that moment. There was no organization. They had completely lost the power to create a movement, a mass movement. So just at that moment, as luck would have it, the INA soldiers were coming back, and the people rose in rebellion. And Congress got its main plank for the upcoming Central Assembly and state government elections, provincial elections. So immediately, Congress formed a committee for defending the INA soldiers in the court. But its approach to the whole Azadi movement was duplicitous. It was hypocritical
Mm.
because Congress did not subscribe to the idea of armed resistance or armed invasion. It was against the idea of violence. That was against Gandhian principle. So they had to play with words. They had to devise a way to show that they were genuinely in favor of the INA. So what they tried was started saying was that although we don't believe in the way the means they adopted, we accept that they were patriots and so we must defend them.
Like they used it like a catalytic action kind of thing for stirring their
Absolutely.
elections and for like the smooth running for building up the movement. They just used it as a backbone.
Absolutely.
But the reality lies where it is.
So a defense committee, INA defense committee was set up, and they defended the INA soldiers in the Red Fort, where the picture of Pandit Nehru was displayed very prominently. That he was wearing the lawyer's gown and walking into the uh, courtroom and all. But the actual case was argued by Bhulabhai Desai, and Bhulabhai Desai was completely sidelined in all this publicity and propaganda that came afterwards. Congress went to the election, and their organizational principle was that praise the INA activities, the soldiers, their patriotism, but don't praise Subhas Bose. And this is available, I'm not making it up, this is available from one of the letters written by Sardar Patel. So he said that no need to praise their leader. So, so that then his stature, anyway, his stature was so high. So why give him more publicity? There was that was the main headache at that time. Even under those situations, they were worried about not taking Subhash Chandra's name. So that was funny. But what happened after that is, there's one more thing which your audience must know. That when the British government published the transfer of power documents in the 1970s, many hitherto unknown facts and official documents came out for the first time. And one of the documents showed that the Congress had sent people around the country to gauge the public mood. And when they saw that there was overwhelming support for the INA, that's when they decided that we should also support the INA to win the elections, because that will get us votes, that will get us acceptance and currency, and whatever organizational momentum was lost, we will regain that momentum.
That means the welcoming of the INA and the acceptance of the INA by the Congress was more like
It's a political device.
It's a political. Like, it's not a sentimental kind of thing that has been passed on, that has been coming from. That is not a feeling. That is more of like the electoral benefit.
Yes, and in all the speeches at that time, the Congress leaders started using the example of the INA everywhere, and even leaders like Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, uh, uh, Sardar Patel, Jawaharlal Nehru, and others, top leaders, they started saying that once we gain freedom, once power is transferred to our hands, this Indian National Army will form the core of the Indian Army in free India.
Okay.
And the Indian National Army soldiers were used in the election for election purposes. They went for Congress campaign. They were used for taking messages to people. So just they were used more like clerks and peons. And when the question came up as to what they should do now, what is the livelihood, because the country, various institutions in the country had set up INA relief fund because there was no money for them. They were cashiered. They were thrown out of the army. So they had no livelihood. Where would they get money for sustenance? So two things happened. One, they got a lot of support from the British Indian Army. Indians in the British Indian Army started sending them money and started giving them psychological support. And that is what scared the British government, that we are losing the support of the army. We cannot rely on them anymore. And various newspapers, even the Congress, and independently, INA relief fund was set up. And lakhs of rupees were collected. Nobody knows how that money was spent. There is no account available. No account available. Most of this money was deposited with the Indian National Congress, the AICC. Till that, there has been no accounting as to how that money was spent, how much was raised, and when others raised it, how much was deposited with the AICC, and what happened to that money. There is no accounting. So all this happened once the elections were over and the power was transferred. Then the government of India decided that the INA soldiers will not be taken into the Indian Army. So a complete U-turn from INA will form the core of Free India's army to INA soldiers cannot get into the Indian army. Another U-turn. So there were previous U-turns. The Congress had promised that we will, our goal is Purna Swaraj, complete independence. They took a U-turn and settled for dominion status. They had promised that there will be no connection with the British Empire, with the British government. They took a U-turn and joined the Commonwealth. And here, then there was a third promise that we will not let India be divided, be partitioned. They took a U-turn and accepted the partition. So those three U-turns, and on top of that, that INA will form the core of Indian Army. Two, INA cannot be taken into the Indian Army. So people were just let go of. So when the question arose, what would they do then? Some very sympathetic provincial governments, where Congress leaders were sympathetic individually, they appointed a lot of INA soldiers in police and home guard positions. But when the question came up to Gandhiji, Gandhiji said that these are all able-bodied people. Let them go and do farming. So from soldiers to farming, that's how it all changed. A lot of people, most of the INA soldiers went and lived in utter poverty, utter poverty. They were not even given the status of freedom fighters. That status came only in the 1970s. So 25 years, 30 years later, after independence. And you can understand how they were treated when you look at the treatment given to Netaji. Netaji's portrait in the parliament was put up only in 1978, 30 years after independence. Whereas Gandhiji's portrait went up in the central hall, in the central assembly, when he was alive.
Yeah.
So that is the difference in treatment. And that's how INA was treated. Now, coming to your question of, so that was a betrayal.
Yeah.
That was absolute betrayal.
I get it.
And only a few people were picked up for plum posting by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, where they were given postings in the foreign service. Only few, you can count them in your fingers. But otherwise, everybody went through utter poverty, and there was a complete, total betrayal of the INA soldiers.
This is not only betrayal, like this is kind of like using it for our own good.
That's a betrayal. They fought for the country. They were the only Indians in army which were fighting for the India's liberation. The British Indian Army was not fighting for India's freedom. They were fighting for the British Empire. They were fighting in Africa. They were fighting in Europe. They were fighting in Southeast Asia. They were fighting for the preservation of the empire, not to liberate India. The INA was the only army fighting to liberate India. So that is the betrayal.
Yes. Sir, you are talking about a very interesting timeline in Indian history. I'll ask a question in that timeline. You and Anuj have highlighted a conversation between Justice P.B. Chakravarti and British Prime Minister Clement Attlee, where Attlee said that Gandhi's role in the freedom struggle was minimal. You are campaigning about it. If you could say something about it, like...
See, the incident is well known now. Even a decade ago, it was not so well known, but we have publicized it very well, and we have made the letter written by Justice Chakravarti accessible to everybody. Now you will find it everywhere on social media. It was his handwritten letter to the publisher who published Ramesh Chandra Majumdar's autobiography. So that story now everybody knows. Attlee came and visited the Bengal Raj Bhavan, and there he told Justice Chakravarti about this incident. When Justice Chakravarti asked him, and interestingly, the day when he was there, the date was 21st October, the formation day of the Azadin government and the Azadin Fauj. So it was 10 years later, but the day was very interesting. The coincidence was very interesting. But Attlee did not tell this only to Justice Chakravarti. Later, he told historian Barun Day also. Barun Day wrote about it in Telegraph. It was published. So it is not only one source. And people who question the credibility of Justice P.B. Chakravarti, they should look at their own status. I mean, Justice Chakravarti, he was the acting governor at that time, the first Indian Chief Justice of the Kolkata High Court. I mean, who are you questioning? And he was not a partisan man, so he recounted this thing much later. And Justice Chakravarti said another interesting thing at that time, which is completely understandable, is that he had gone to give a lecture in the Netaji Research Bureau on Netaji's birth anniversary occasion, one of the years at that time, and he had recounted this incident. But when his speech was broadcast by the All India Radio, this part was chopped out. So this was edited. It was not broadcast. This only this part. So you know how things happened at that time in the Congress era, the early years and even later years. Subhash Chandra Bose was always sidelined, and anything related to Subhash Bose, INA or anything, that was also sidelined. It was suppressed, marginalization. That trend remained. But the thing is that it was not only Clement Attlee who was saying this. Clement Attlee is, of course, the most important man because he is the person who signed the uh, transfer agreement. He is the man who signed the legislation which gave India independence. So he was the Prime Minister of England who handed over power to India. So I mean, if he is saying, who can be above him to attest this fact? But this same thing, without knowing, or maybe knowingly, whatever, it was repeated by B.R. Ambedkar also.
Yes.
It was repeated by Savarkar also from different lines of ideological spectrum. So neither Ambedkar nor Savarkar were great fans of Subhash Bose, but when they were talking, they were giving the complete credit for this. The the hastening, the quickening of the exit of the British Raj, that happened due to Netaji and INA. And it was intelligible to anybody with common sense, except for the those who were in power who wanted to suppress the truth and create a new narrative, new story. So that's clear now. I mean, I think even a kid would understand that.
Yes, sir. uh, Sir, another question from that timeline only about the Cold War geopolitics. It's like, in your view, how Cold War geopolitics influenced the way Netaji's fate was handled by global powers, including India?
See, Netaji, after formation of Azadin government, he declared war on Britain and America, on the Allied powers, not on Russia, only on Britain and America. Although Soviet Union, USA, and UK were allies. But he declared war against only America and Britain. So obviously, he was number one enemy of the British Empire. He was the only politician against whom an order to kill was issued by the British government, which Churchill government did. So the special operations executive were instructed to kill him when he was on his way from India to Europe. The Japanese, the German, the Italian were extremely cautious on the mode of transferring him to Europe, from Europe to Southeast Asia, because they knew that at the first instance he would be killed. So they were all debating for over a year whether it should be by a submarine, whether it should be by a plane, or by any other means. What would be the best way? So that was there. Everybody knew that he would be killed. But what happened after this thing? In this, but in the broader scheme of things, the INA was not so important in the for the United States. The United States had a much bigger footprint all over the world, and it is their entry which turned the tide of the Second World War. Otherwise, they would have been in a bad position, very pathetic position. But for the USA, Netaji was not such an important factor, but they were very keenly keeping an eye on what was going on. So when I was writing Netaji's biography, Bose the Untold Story, what I noticed was fascinating, that Indian newspapers had no mention of Netaji because it was the government policy that all news will be blacked out. But in the US, every newspaper, even the small town newspapers, every day they would carry some news or other on Netaji. Although Netaji was not a big name in the US, but his movements, his speeches, who he was meeting with, what did he do, regular, regular routine updates in newspapers. So that shows that he was being tracked. The US government intelligence was tracking him. That was clear. Even after the war, they were discussing him, what to do and all. British, of course, was doing it, but even the Soviet Union was doing it. Even after war ended, and when they sent their agents to uh, figure out who would be the potential uh, candidates for leading the country who would be sympathetic to the US. So their agents were talking about Netaji and about his whereabouts, possible reappearance, his ideological bent, and everything. So, and in his escape from India to Europe, the Soviet Union gave him the passage. Although, I mean, they were not ideologically inclined towards him. They refused to give him the assistance, but they gave him safe passage. So he passed through Moscow to Berlin. Now, after the Second World War ended, when the Cold War started, Russia separated, which Netaji had predicted long time back. That after the war is over and the spoils are distributed, Soviet Union will move away from these two powers, and we will utilize that. So, in his mind, Soviet Union was always an ally, and British obviously, and the UK obviously, and the USA obviously looked at him as an anti-imperialist kind of a threat. So he was the enemy. And although when the British were hunting for him after they captured Southeast Asia, after they captured Singapore, recaptured Singapore, after they recaptured Japan, they were hunting for him. But Wavell's notes during those times, or his executive council's, governing council's notes, if you look at them, so his home minister is writing that the first thing they do is they don't mark him as a war criminal. They said that he does not qualify as a war criminal. First thing. Second thing is let him be where he is, which in straightforward words means that they know where he is, that he is not dead, but he is, because if they were talking about his presence in Singapore or Bangkok, and at that time they would have specified, mentioned that he is in Singapore and Bangkok, and let him be there. But he was not there, because and everybody in Southeast Asia, all INA soldiers were being rounded up. They were arrested. They were either put in Singapore jail or brought back to India later on, whatever. Some were hung, some were hanged, and some were killed. There was no reason to leave him alone if he was there. But they knew he was not there and knew where he was. That's why Home Secretary Moody, he wrote in his note that let him be where he is. So, but that attention was always focused on him, and that decided. I mean, as we have found out later on that he was alive and he returned to India. That was one of the big factors which were decided, which influenced his decision, the way he operated after coming back to India.
Okay, sir. Hmm. Sir, if the truth about Netaji were fully acknowledged today, like if the theory and everything, so like right now the propaganda, as you mentioned in the first answer, the propaganda has reduced everything to like it is just a theory. There is nothing like true. Like it is circulated like a theory thing. If the truth about Netaji were fully acknowledged today, how do you think it would alter India's understanding about its freedom movement?
See, one thing, the way things have changed is since we started bringing out the truth about Netaji. In the last 20 years, what we have been doing, it has not been a job of one night. It is a very slow, gradual process. There was a lot of resistance, but we kept on digging out information and putting it out in public domain. We wrote books, we wrote articles, spoke in different forums and all. What has happened is, till then, till about the initial years of this century, of the new millennium, everything was Gandhi Nehru oriented. Everything. You look at the number of government schemes and programs, the number of government monuments, the number of government programs, uh, educational institutions, or any institution, even sports institutions, entertainment institutions, everything. Nehru Gandhi, Nehru Gandhi, Nehru Gandhi. Nobody got any space. So for the first time, Netaji was coming up as a big challenge, unraveling all that has been going on for these last 6 decades after independence. So suddenly the goalpost changed for this meta narrative. That Okay, Netaji was important, but you know, we still got independence through ahimsa and satyagraha. Now, the fact is, ahimsa and satyagraha got us independence. That is the official narrative. And that narrative was started by Pandit Nehru in his first speech from Red Fort after transfer of power. The problem that it started, or the phenomenon that it started, was to hype up that narrative, where only Gandhiji and his close ones, including Pandit Nehru, would get the prime position. So that's the pantheon which got India her freedom through non-violent means, through understanding and friendship with the British. The British left because they understood that they had been uh, occupying India, torturing its people. They were very regretful, remorseful, and they essentially being nice people. They realized that see, we have overdone things, and we should not continue to do bad things like this. Let's go home. And Gandhiji was sitting there running his charka, and he said, "Okay, we are both brothers, we are friends. So you are free to stay as long as you want, but I mean, transfer power and you stay. That we have no problem and all." So there was a big understanding, a big friendly hug, and ultimately they left. That's how it all happened. So nice and feel good factor. All those people who had given their lives, lost everything in their lives, suffered unmentionable torture, their families were destroyed, people who went and fought abroad, everybody was forgotten. Everybody was forgotten. Their sacrifices were forgotten. Only lip service was paid. The effect that they had been forgotten. It was only lip service. That too many people, a lot of people have fought for our independence and everything, but finally it was Mahatma Gandhi who got us freedom. How? Let's check. Let's start from 1942. Cripps mission comes. 1942, Cripps comes with a uh, proposal that these are some of the proposals. You agree to it, and after the war ends, we will start the process of writing the new constitution for free India, and then gradually, eventually, we will hand over power. No timeline was set that when, because we will transfer power to the Indians was being said from 1917. But never ever did the British government specify a timeline that we will live by this. So they were said that whenever the Indians are prepared and the setting is favorable, we will go. You rule after that. But when nobody ever uttered a word from the 1930s, the British government inserted a new angle to it. He said, till the time the Muslims and other minorities and the princely states, they don't feel fully secure and there is no understanding between all the parties, we cannot just leave India at the mercy of Congress. First you settle your disputes, resolve the problems among yourselves, then only we will talk. And that was impossible because it is the British who were fomenting problems, and obviously sympathetic people to the British who saw their own interest reflected in their policies, like Jinnah and others, many others. I'm naming only Jinnah, but there were many others. Saw their advantage, their political future in it. So they would not let that happen. So it continued. Cripps went back. Gandhiji at that time, what we find from Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's India Wins Freedom is that he was so influenced by Netaji's daredevilry. That's it was unimaginable that somebody could leave home like that. I mean, hoodwink the British intelligence, the most efficient intelligence in the whole world, hoodwink them on his own, reach Northwest Frontier Province, cross over to Germany and Italy. I mean, start working there, set up a government in exile. He was so impressed and so influenced by that. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad tells us that he decided to go for the Quit India movement. That's what drove him towards that, taking that step. But as soon as the uh, announcement was made from Azad Maidan on 8th August, everybody, all the top leadership, Congress top leadership was thrown into jail, and there was no leadership left to guide the movement. It went out of control. For a certain period of time, for the next few weeks, the movement remained peaceful. But gradually, everybody was thrown into jail. The entire Congress organization was into jail. What happened after that was that the movement went underground and the movement became violent, extremely violent. And Netaji was broadcasting from Germany at that time. And he was guiding what to do, how to build the movement, how to build a guerrilla movement, how to undertake sabotage. So all those things he was giving instructions from there, and the underground revolutionaries, including leaders of the uh, Congress Socialist Party, they were doing all these things, and local revolutionaries from people of the Forward Bloc and other non-partisan revolutionaries who were there, they were acting accordingly. So two things happened. The 1942 movement, Quit India movement, became the most un-Gandhian, the most non-Gandhian movement. It was violent. It became extremely violent. Number one. Number two, it went underground. Both are against Gandhian principles. Gandhiji never liked any underground movement. He never accepted. He said all movements should be ethical and visible to everybody, transparent, and people should know. Underground movements are not acceptable. And violence, of course, was not acceptable, never acceptable. So when they came out of jail, the entire top Congress leadership, they disowned the 1942 movement. So if today the Congress or anybody, unfortunately and tragically and ironically and even hilariously, the BJP also says that it was Quit India movement was Gandhiji's movement. It was not. It was not Gandhiji's movement. It went out of control completely, and Gandhiji had nothing to do with. He had disowned it. The entire top Congress leadership disowned the movement, but it scared the government. So when that the INF trials were going on, and there was the rebellion in the Royal Indian Air Force, there was rebellion in the Royal Indian Navy, there was rebellion in the cantonments, Japalpur cantonments. There was strikes in the railways. There were strikes in the postal service. The student community throughout the country had become violent, and they rose up in revolutionary spirit. That's when they started fearing that 1942 phenomenon will return. They even feared that India was going back to a situation like 1857, where everybody was putting up an united front and fighting for throwing out the British. And that's when they decided to leave. That's when they announced. That's when actually announced that we are leaving. For the first time, a date was specified. We are leaving by the end of June 1948. And when Mountbatten came, he advanced the timeline to 15th August 1947, mid August 1947. And to rub salt on the wound, he chose 15th August because 15th August was important to him personally. 15th August was not chosen by the Congress or our leaders. 15th August was chosen by Mountbatten because it was the day when Japan announced their surrender. And that was Mountbatten's crowning glory. So he inflicted that wound, and we were very happy without knowing, without realizing. So, where is the non-violent satyagraha movement anywhere in this sequence? The only non-violent thing that was happening at that time were the conferences. In 1945 June, the Simla conference happened. It failed. The discussions and debates that happened thereafter, all of them failed. It was only when in early 1940s, from end of 1945 to early 1946, all these uprisings were happening. That's when the government got seriously scared. The government did not use force to suppress that movement. They played very intelligently. Who suppressed the movement? The Congress. Under Mahatma Gandhi's instruction, Pandit Nehru and Sardar Patel came to Bombay and told the revolting uh, Navy officers that this is not the time to do such activities. calm down. We will look at all your grudges, complaints, because the day is very near when the power will be transferred. Everything will become okay. Now, don't do anything. We are talking now. So, why are you creating trouble? Let us talk. That whole shift became the undoing of the freedom struggle, the movement. And that was Congress is doing. So, where is the role of non-violence anywhere? If non-violence is responsible for anything, Satyagraha is responsible for anything, it is a partition of India.